All right. It being 6 o'clock and a quorum of the Conservation Commission present, I'm going to call to order the meeting of the October 18th meeting. This meeting is being recorded and broadcasted live and will be broadcasted in the future and available online. So first order of business is accepting of meeting minutes for October 4th.
So moved.
Second.
Any comments, questions?
Nope.
All right, roll call.
Delco, aye.
Langer and I.
Clock eye.
Chancelucci, aye.
Dan's aye. Right, minutes are approved. And then the next is applications for the request for determination of applicability for 72 Ridge Road. I don't see anyone here, but I don't think we necessarily need anyone for here. So this was that isolated area. I can probably bring it up.
Oh, on
That I think.
Ridge Road, you
yeah,
went.
yeah.
Yeah.
You and
Yeah.
Joe.
So I think we determined that it was too small of an area to be isolated land subject to flooding because it didn't meet the quarter-acre foot, and it didn't appear to have any connections to other wetland resource areas. Therefore, it wouldn't be bordering. So if anything, it would just qualify as isolated, and that's not regulated under the Act.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any other questions, comments about the RDA?
No.
Otherwise, I think this was just kind of procedurally to make sure it was on the books. So we're looking for a motion for a negative determination that the area is not subject to protection under the Wetland Protection Act, which I think is reason one.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call,
Delco, aye.
Langer and I.
Clock eye.
Chancelucci, aye.
and Dan's aye. We have no hearings. So, old and new business was, I don't see him either, was 38 River Road, the bridge project.
Oh.
Yes.
So, there was a question of, and Tamika, please step in if there's something I'm missing. When Natural Heritage came out to do the survey or for their part of the project approval, they mentioned that the site survey is 5 years old and if that would still be acceptable to the Conservation Commission. So Tamika uploaded the plan that we have, and I will share it in just a second. So one thing that I noticed when I was looking at this is that it's only an existing conditions plan. It's not a site plan. So this was for a bridge, I think replacement.
It's there.
It's there, but they're going to build one next to it.
Yes.
I think from what I remember.
Yep.
So there definitely would be resource area impacts. So in my mind, when I look at this, I think, yes, we need a new site plan, but only because this isn't.
If you ever saw it,
Yeah, but it's going to be a whole new bridge.
yeah, but how that's laid out over there. I mean, I used to drive the railroad truck through the river to go to his house.
Yeah.
It's
Oh, this is Ian's.
Ian's house.
Yeah, so if I can just
Yep.
add to this, he plans on submitting an NOI, and it's been a very extensive process
Oh,
for
yeah.
him. So he plans on attending our next meeting on November 1st, and he has a great deal of information that he wants to share with the commission to solicit your feedback from.
Mhm.
So this was just kind of an initial question that he had in response to their question.
Okay.
But he plans on coming next
Okay.
time with
Yeah.
a lot of info for you
Okay.
guys.
Perfect.
Yep.
He came to us a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah.
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 It's been
Yeah.
going on
It's
forever.
been around forever.
And then
Yeah.
Chad installed.
A house that never should have been built.
You know, things that came up.
Yeah, and I think Tamika and I have been helping.
Mm.
Every once in a while, there's a question.
Yeah, he'll send,
Yeah.
he sends a question. and
So he's been on it.
Yeah, that one,
Yeah.
yeah, right from the very beginning, we had recommended to him to get together with DCR.
Yeah.
Which he did, and
Yeah.
I think that's part of what's taken so long to get to this point. I did upload under the November 1st folder. I actually uploaded, he provided me with a bunch of documents that I uploaded to there for the following meeting. So
Okay.
I don't know if we want to take a quick look and see if there is a different plan in there that might be, this is just the one that he sent to me in the email with that question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just give me a second. I have too many Gmail
Have you ever
accounts.
seen that?
Yeah, years ago though.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the first ones you went and saw.
Yeah, I think it was maybe right before COVID. You said November 1st, right?
Yes.
Okay. Bridge project. All right, so I'm gonna stop the sharing.
Yeah, that triggered a whole host of different things.
Because it's like every resource area you could
Oh,
possibly
you
hit.
couldn't,
Yeah.
you couldn't hit anything else?
Yeah.
That triggered everything, so
Yeah.
it's not surprising that it's been dragging on this long.
Yeah, I think
You know, to
he's
get everybody-
exhausted.
all the other
It's been a
departments
very
Well, he's been
approval.
doing it
process for
himself.
him.
Yeah,
Right.
he's doing a phenomenal job for what
That's
he's
a lot.
doing. Okay, so this is the bridge as it stands now.
Mhm.
So it's just. Okay, so there is a proposed. I'm scrolling too fast. Like, I'm not gonna read this all. I'm just gonna find the.
No, yeah, I just wasn't sure. He had planned to talk about
Well,
this next
bring-
time. I just wasn't sure.
Oh, there you
if there was
go.
another
That's the
plan.
one we want, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so there does appear to be some sort of proposed condition plan.
Yep.
So that would be the only thing that I would really think, besides having the resource areas and their buffer zones kind of laid out. But
Yep.
it's such a tight area that, the buffer zones aren't really what we're worried about. It's really the wetland itself, so.
It even shows the oil truck drive-through.
Yep.
His most recent question was about the existing conditions plan, right? He was curious if that was still acceptable.
Well, we
I'm gonna have Melissa double check the email because I don't remember the wording
Okay.
specifically, but he did state it in the email.
Yeah, he just mentioned five years
Yeah.
old.
Yep.
And that was the only thing that you had uploaded, so I assumed. But. Because I don't think the, existing conditions plan has
Well-
changed.
I was gonna say, if there's been no work, if
Well, the only
nothing's-
difference originally, he was gonna try to fix that one,
Yeah.
and now he's
Yeah.
now he's gonna leave and go and then take the other. So that's the only change there is.
Okay.
So you're gonna swap one for another is what
Yeah.
you're gonna do. But yeah,
I'm assuming he hasn't done any
No.
actual construction on site, then I
Nope.
would say,
No,
even if this plan is 5 years old, it's probably still accurate.
yeah, we just have to just update it.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah, the only thing I was gonna say was, if the flagging
Mhm.
is 5 years old, then that probably needs to be updated. But
yeah. But
other than that, like,
have
has
you
the-
ever seen it?
No, I have not.
It's legitimately.
It's a river.
Here's the river.
Yeah.
Here's the bridge,
Yeah,
and that's the only way to the house.
yeah.
So it's legitimately.
I remember when we came in front of us last time, so I was looking at the aerial to remind myself, like, yeah,
Oh,
I remember
yeah.
this now. It's like you can't get to his house without going over
No.
the river.
Nope.
It's a weird shaped lot, too.
Yeah.
5 years ago when I first walked across
Crazy.
it, the thing that was noticeable was how springy.
The bridge was.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Yikes.
So
That's why the oil trucks didn't go across the bridge.
well, besides,
Yeah,
it wouldn't
imagine.
fit.
Oh, it's tough for a homeowner to have a bridge. Jeez.
Yeah.
Especially one over this much of a protected resource.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just, it can be costly.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, if you need any help responding to him, let me know. If he has further questions before November, I'm happy to.
Yeah, and we'll just have to update all our stuff anyways.
Yeah.
New dates on it, and probably take a peek again.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd like to see it in person.
Yeah.
That'd be good.
Yeah, definitely. All right, great. So this is on the November 1st folder if anyone wants to check it out. Awesome. Yeah, he spent a lot of time putting this together, that's for sure. Okay. Anything else on that? Did I get my turn? Oh, perfect. Our second item was discussion of wetlands bylaw and regulations. Peter is not with us tonight, unfortunately. And I have not
Right.
gotten anything, so unless there's some awe-inspiring thoughts you've all had about our wetlands bylaw.
The last time I spoke to Peter, he said he was going to draft something because
Okay.
he felt like that was probably the only way
Yeah.
we were going to make progress was
Yeah,
to
draft and then work,
something.
then work
Yeah.
backwards.
So
Work backwards off.
So that
Yep.
he said that was his intention. So.
Okay.
So he was going to plagiarize 5 towns, put them together,
Well, I
and then
mean,
we're
I
going to
think
work
even
backwards.
just downloading the MACC model bylaws, the
Right.
easiest way
I
to
think that's
start.
where to start.
Yeah.
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 I know
Good
Peters
start.
doesn't love the model one.
No one
but
loves it,
I think that's where you start.
but you can at least, like, I use that when I'm working with towns, at least to, like, look at the exemptions and the kind of what goes above and beyond and kind of work forward and backwards at the same time, going through those.
Right.
And it's like, would this be relevant? Okay, yes, but a different, length or,
Yeah.
area or
Yeah.
whatnot. So,
Right.
if nothing else, yeah, it's just, it's set up in a way that we know can be accepted, even
Yeah.
though it's not the best.
Yeah. You
Right.
have to start from scratch,
Yeah,
which
exactly.
would be much more difficult.
Yep. All right.
It's important to expound the values in this because the last time we went to select board, not select board, but the town meeting
Mm-hmm.
for approval of bylaws, Conservation Commission bylaws, I think 2 people might have voted positive.
Really?
Really?
Yeah, it got
Oh, yeah.
voted down.
When
Oh,
was
yeah.
that? How long ago?
7.
More than that.
More than
More than
that.
that. More like
8 to 10.
more like 10. Yeah. I would,
Yeah,
Oh,
it was
wow.
when I first got on the board of selectmen,
Yeah.
way back that far.
yeah. It didn't go over well with the public,
I didn't realize that.
and I don't understand why. I mean,
Misunderstanding.
Yeah.
but I think we need to be very, I think a little more clear
Mhm.
as to what the advantages are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Everybody was busy at that meeting expounding all the ills,
Yeah.
but
Not
not
pointing out like the good points. that
Mhm.
were-
right, the things that it will accomplish for the
Yeah.
town and for the wetlands and for everything else, you know, what wildlife, everything included. I mean, it was a whole host of things that you,
Yeah, it's too
and
bad.
I don't think that at the time we did a good enough job.
Some more
Uh,
education, outreach is definitely
exactly, and I think
necessary.
Right.
one of the things that we might want to do also, and I'm maybe jumping ahead of a little bit here, but one of the other things we might want to do is create some type of an informational
Mhm.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
brochure, pamphlet, you know,
Yep.
post it online,
Mm.
you know, put it on our website
Yeah.
so that people can refer to it. And I think, you know, the composition of that is where we're going to make the
Yeah.
sale, if you will.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people think of wetlands bylaws as like a taking.
Mhm.
You know, it's limiting your ability to work on your own land, and it's like get that
Exactly.
point of view. It's like, but there's a
Well,
reason.
yeah.
Prior to the last time, the prior to that would have, it was a whole host, a laundry list of things which included what type of paint you could use on your house. So there was a bad taste in people's mouths
Okay.
based on way back
Mm-hmm.
type history, you know, like when
Yeah.
I first got on this more than 20 years ago, that I think really got people in an uproar.
Mhm.
So the next time we went, even though we had eliminated all those, things that were most objectionable, there was still that thought that it was overreach and it was this, it was that. So we gotta be, we gotta do a good sales job on it, not,
Yeah.
because you gotta sell it to the public. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
there's no two ways about it. They get to determine, what
What goes, it don't go, yep.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I always think education is key. So definitely, as we start to get into the not final form, but as we start to really solidify what our kind of extras will be, kind
Mhm.
of putting those out there and why they're important and how it's not too prohibitive, and it's
Right.
really just solidifying what we try to do now, and we actually have the legal action to enforce.
Yeah, I don't know if we even have the ability on the town website for people to kind of
Yeah.
throw suggestions in, or,
We could do like an informational session,
We
right?
could,
Where
yeah.
we could
and I think that might
get
be,
feedback directly
Absolutely.
from the public.
Yeah, like a
Yeah,
public
that'll-
forum where
yeah.
we have a bylaw
Yeah.
draft.
Well, then they can ask everything too.
Yep.
yeah, and that'll give us
Takes a
better
couple
direction.
times.
That's
Mm.
fine.
If it helps at town meeting,
Yeah.
it's worth it.
Again, you gotta make sure, you hope those
I know.
folks show up.
Go
Right,
to
'cause
town
meeting.
it's the
Government
same.
is run by those that show up.
Yeah.
That's true.
So,
Yes, the 3% that show up to town meeting. Okay, cool. No, that's good. I didn't realize it had gotten that far at
Yeah, I
town
didn't
meeting.
know that either. Wow.
And failed so, unfortunately.
I'll be the historian.
Perfect. All right. So we'll work on the draft of the bylaw. Worst case scenario, we'll just pick up the MACC and start pulling through it. Any other thoughts on bylaws and regs? No.
Nope.
We got a pretty good list going already, right?
We did.
Yeah,
I
Yeah.
think the one's on the Google Drive.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I picked out like the most common ones that I
Mhm.
see in, most towns. But at least getting our 20-foot, no touch as a
Yeah, I think
official no touch and not
Yeah.
just policy.
those might be we talked about a no-touch zone, possibly a no-structure zone.
Yep.
I think we'll want to make sure those are, you know,
Really
reasonable.
Yeah.
Right.
Because obviously we don't want to make those too restrictive,
Yeah.
because then it would just get shot down.
And it's
Right.
also important to let people know that like
It's still adjustable.
they're in their waivers. You know, it's not
Yes,
that it's,
it doesn't mean you can't,
Yeah.
you can't still,
like, if
you
you
know,
have a
do
small
work.
lot and you need to
Yeah.
replace your septic, like
It is what
it's
it is.
gotta happen,
Right,
yeah.
right.
Like,
you know, it's
like a
not-
bridge.
right. No, it's not like
Like a bridge to your house. You,
Right.
you really don't have an option.
the waiver isn't just for, you know, a normal lot where they just want to
Yeah.
go as far as they can.
Right.
It's really for those tiny lots that we have every once in a while, or the old houses that are on a stream and they need to fix the house.
Mm.
All right. So that's it for old and new business. Next one is public comment. Do we have anyone from the public who'd like to speak?
I just had some more.
Name and address.
Yeah, can you please, introduce yourself for the record? Name and
I'm
address?
Cody Coyne. I just had some more regulations that I needed
Sure.
help with. To just understand. At the July 19th, 2022 and October 4th, 2022 meeting, the question was asked of the commission, Conservation Commission, about their role in regulating or evaluating any kind of activity outside the buffer zone
Mhm.
that may affect the integrity or disrupt the quality of a wetland. And at both those meetings, at least at first, it was, if it's outside the buffer zone, we don't have anything to do with it. There wasn't, I think Melissa alluded to something at the end, and so I just wanted to clarify that, and then I have a question at the end. The Wetlands Protection Act Regulation 310 CMR 10.00, Section 10.023D, activity outside the wetland buffer zone not subject to MGL Chapter 131, Section 4D does not require the filing of a notice of intent unless it will or does, referring to the activity of the project, alter the wetlands project resource area in accord with MGL 13140. If the issuing authority determines that such activity has or will alter the wetlands resource area protected under MGL 13140, it may require the filing of a notice of intent or enforcement of an order that shall impose such conditions on the activity or any portion thereof as it is deemed necessary to contribute to the protection of the interest identified in MGL 13140. So you do have authority outside the buffer
Unless
zone.
and until, so that's what I was talking about at the end of the meeting is,
Right.
so if the activity is taken outside of the buffer zone, it is not subject to regulation under the Wetlands Protection Act, unless and until we can find evidence that that activity has directly altered the wetland itself.
Right,
So
so
not
that
altered.
leads to my
Yeah.
question.
Yep.
So that leads to my question.
Okay.
How do you tell that if it hasn't been characterized in its original state?
So,
How can you, I mean,
well, that's
100%
where-
of the time?
yeah,
It
so
hasn't been
that's,
characterized before
Right.
that.
Right.
How do you know? Like, well, that's the way it's always been. You know,
well, that's where it can be difficult. So, you know, in some cases it's very easy, like, okay, there's sediment coming from a construction site that's outside of the buffer zone that has made its way into a wetland. That
Right.
is probably 9 out of 10 of the things that
Right.
we would see where that particular citation comes into effect. It's typically those type of activities, and it's right. It's usually when it's a visual impact, like there is sediment flowing, and we
Right.
can see that the wetland has been filled or altered.
right,
In some instances, like I think at the last meeting you mentioned, you know, maybe if water is cut off from the flow, so
Right.
the water's not going to
how do
it.
you tell if a wetland's been choked?
That can be a little bit more difficult. You know, sometimes we have to rely on if we have if properties adjacent to it have been permitted in the recent past, then we have a recollection of where those wetland flags used to be. But they also, wetlands do naturally change. That's why our permits and wetland flags are only good for 3 years.
So that's another dodge, though.
It's not
It
necessarily
can be.
another
Oh, it
dodge.
changed.
It can change. I mean, it's
Yeah.
very obvious when it's drastic.
Right.
Wetland hydrology, it takes at least 10 years for it to change, so it's
Right.
not instant. So if all of a sudden, you have an area that's flooded and it starts to dry out, we then have to do some digging and understanding, okay, where are the inlets and the outlets of this, if it's a water body or wetland resource area, because sometimes it's as simple as there's a beaver dam and it's backing up water and it's
Sure.
impacting a wetland. And technically that's a violation of the Wetlands Protection Act.
Right.
If we, and a lot of it, unfortunately, is we don't know about things until we get a complaint. Because we
That
can't
was
go
my
on
next
private
question. Do
property.
you routinely check that?
We can't go on
You're
private
just
property.
waiting for somebody to tell you.
We can only go on properties that have an open either application or permit in front of us. So those are the only ones that we can go in within reasonable hours and notification to them to go. I mean, we try to see things from the road, but because we don't have staff, there's no one who kind of can go around not that we search for violations necessarily, but who can follow up and keep an eye on various projects in town.
Can you use drones or satellite?
I have heard of towns doing that. Like, we do use aerial imagery, I think every single meeting to compare, anywhere from 2010 to the 2021 images that the state has. So we do look at those kind of historic aerial images throughout the years to see, at least from a bird's eye view, if the wetland seems to have changed a little bit. And if we see that, okay, the flooded area seems to be more substantial than it used to be, then we look at things like building permits. Have there been new construction that's been in the area, or are there any culverts that might be blocked? Or
Do you do that? I know you're saying you can do that. Do you do that?
if we know about it, yes.
If
So
it's,
you're dependent on
a
reports
complaint.
from other people?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
You
or
don't
what
think
we
that
see
should
around
be some
town.
kind of
Yeah.
proactive responsibility?
We work full-time jobs. I mean,
I
Yeah.
understand that,
we
but
do
I'm,
site visits on the weekends. I mean, things that we see. I mean, but I don't drive around on Saturdays around every town, trying to see every single wetland. So we do kind of not quite citizen science, but we do rely on the general public as much as we can, that if they believe that there's something going on, no matter what we believe the violation may or may not be or how serious it is, we send the homeowner a letter, we ask to see the property. We've even gone so far recently to almost get a court order to get on a property. So it is something we take seriously if we think that a wetland resource area has been impacted and we can have enough evidence to prove that.
so you routinely check.
If we know about it, yes.
So would that possibly be a responsibility of your new agent that you would share with the
We don't
nearby
have an agent.
community? Well, no, that was discussed. at the
they're
last
talking
meeting.
about.
Possibly.
We've been hoping for, at least since I've been on, 5 years.
That'd still be reactive. That'd still
Yeah.
be reactive. That
Yeah.
wouldn't be
Yeah.
proactive.
They wouldn't be.
To put into perspective that I'm a conservation agent in another job, in another town, and I do kind of trips around town, but there's only so much that one person can cover. So even as someone, as a staff person in the office, I still rely on people calling for me to know, in different parts of the town that I don't typically go to, say, hey, I don't think something's right. And it's like, okay, can I either come on your property, or if I can see it from the road, I'll go from there. And then we start contacting the landowner and be like, we believe you may have a violation, but it's not saying we are yet because we haven't been on it. So it's, we try to be as proactive as we can, but I mean, things happen in an instant. I mean, some people think just, blowing
Okay.
leaves around could be a violation, but
Well, the main reason why I brought it up is because several meetings says we don't have any authority outside the zone, and that's, I just want to set that,
Yeah,
that's not true.
I understand.
That-
Yeah.
According to the state law,
Yeah.
that's not,
Yeah.
that's not true.
until
You
unless we can prove it directly impacts the wetland itself, yeah.
So the other controversial issue related to the last meeting on October 4th was related to the powers and duties of the Conservation Commission. And under Massachusetts General Law, Part 1, Chapter 40, Title 7, Section 8C, a city or town may accept the responsibility of establishing a conservation commission. Powers and duties. Again, this is This is under Massachusetts general law. This is not the Association of Conservation Commissions. That's not where this comes from, okay? This is from Massachusetts general law. Promotion and development of the natural resources and for the protection of watershed resources. That was a big controversy last time. I just wanted,
Yep.
there was, you know, statements that it didn't, that, you know, that it came from
Understood.
the association, and that's not where it comes from.
Okay.
They reiterate it.
Yep.
But that's
Okay.
Massachusetts general law.
Thank you.
Related to meetings on July 19th and October 4th, a topic of protection of wetland habitat under 310 CMR 1051 through 1060 was brought to the attention of the Conservation Commission. And I think that, at least at that time, the concept that was really trying to be reiterated is that in the Wetlands Protection Act regulations, 310 CMR 1051 through 1059, its primary objective is protection of wildlife habitat.
Mhm.
That's what it is.
I want to reiterate though
Well,
that those
just a
additionals
minute.
don't come in
Just a
until
minute.
thresholds.
I realize there are thresholds and all that, but if you read the preambles for
Mhm.
10 separate sections, every one of those sections is to protect wildlife habitat.
Absolutely.
That's 69 pages.
Yeah.
That doesn't include the stuff for saltwater.
Right.
That's another 53 pages. And all of that is for the protection of wildlife habitat and fisheries. And so this is not, and I realize there's, and I have those,
Okay.
the thresholds and all that for each
Mhm.
one of those sections. But that's what I was trying to enunciate at the last meeting, and I have a question here. I'm coming to a question, is that we don't have anything to do with wildlife, and that, you know, that's where I'm coming from, okay? By default, you do have something to do with wildlife habitat. You have to, you're required to.
It's an interest
So,
of the act, yes.
there was a comment or a response. I mean, just aside from the thresholds, we'll talk about that in a minute. There was a statement, and this is a question, that basically all of those things between 1051 and 1060 are exempt for residential homes. And I can't find that where it's, there are thresholds for square feet and things like
Yeah,
that.
so not
I don't see anything where
necessarily,
it says exempt for residential
it's not
property.
necessarily residential properties. I think what we meant is
Well,
more
that's what
single lot residential families, because by default, typically, they do not meet that amount of disturbance. So like subdivisions, if they were to disturb that
Typically.
5,000 square
Mhm.
feet, yes, typically.
Doesn't give them, it's not a carte blanche
No.
exemption
No,
for
no, no.
residential properties,
No.
which
No,
is,
no, no, sorry, I think what
that's
we
what
meant,
was stated last time.
I think, and you're taking it very literally, so I
I
think what
watched
we
it
meant-
over again,
I understand, and I think, but what our
to
intent
make sure
was.
we didn't make a mistake
Nope,
on
I
it.
understand. Our intent was typical residential, single-family properties.
Okay, so, going on from that, 1051, CMR 1051 through 1060 applies to all work which will remove, fill, grade, dredge, excavate earth, or altering banks, bordering vegetation, wetlands, lands, underwater bodies
Mhm.
subject to flooding, that's right, riverfronts. So you know all that. So related to the habitat, the wildlife habitat that you're kind of responsible for within the community. There, like for banks, there's that 5,000 foot
Yep.
threshold. It's 10% or 50 feet for the banks. I didn't see the 5,000 for that. So I don't think there's 5,000 for the banks.
No, BBW.
Bank is linear footage.
1055, boarding vegetation, wetlands, up to 5,000 square feet. Under the general performance standards, though, you're required for that replacement that's required for that. It's not that you can just infringe on a 5,000 feet, you gotta replace it, which
Yep.
you know. But it's not just that, it says in those regulations, you have to do that with discretion.
Mhm.
It's not something you just say, they ask for it and you give it.
Correct.
It's not, it's with discretion that you honor that,
Mm-hmm.
okay? And the replacement has conditions.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just, oh, we're gonna put plants in here.
Correct.
No,
Correct.
you're absolutely
Okay.
right.
So who oversees that? There's like 7 stipulations. The water level, the groundwater
Mhm.
level, the surface water level, the plants,
So typically,
the horizontal configuration of the replacement with respect to the banks, if there is a
mhm,
replacement, has to be in the same general area. You can't
Yep.
do it over there in Timbuktu.
correct. It
It's
should have a
gotta be
hydrological
here.
connection.
It has to be connected.
So who oversees that?
So typically when we have replication projects, we condition in our order of conditions, which is our permit, that all replication must be overseen by a qualified wetland scientist,
Right.
which is usually hired by the applicant. And so for replication, we also require a 2-year monitoring for success rate. At least 80% plant survival success rate is the standard for
Right.
these conditions. And in each growing at the end of each growing season, they have to submit a monitoring report by a certified professional wetland
And that's
scientist.
by the same person, or do you do that?
We have, the applicant is the one who has to hire the third-party consultant. We review, we determine for compliance, and we have hired peer reviewers that are hired by the Conservation Commission to review and/or, monitor if necessary.
So you're never concerned about conflict of interest in that?
If the professional wetland scientist, it's a professional certification, if we find that they've lied, they can get their license taken away.
Who checks though?
Us.
We would,
We
we
could-
could.
We
We go
still
out.
look at it.
You check?
Yeah.
We still
Oh,
look
yeah.
at
That
it.
was the original.
We still have to sign
Oh,
off.
yeah, we still have to, we
We
still
still
look
have
at
to
it.
sign
We
off.
can- we get a professional opinion and
Yeah.
then we still give our opinion.
Yeah. So
They have to come in for a certificate of compliance, if they have complied with all of our conditions.
Yeah.
We go out and look to see exactly what they've complied with.
So you
If they
check
fail
all
to
these seven,
comply with
all
any
these
one of our
requirements for the
conditions,
replacement. You check.
And we
they
check
don't get
those-
their certificate of
Hold on.
compliance, which freezes the property.
Joe, hold on.
It can't
hold
be
on, hold on.
sold, it can't be done, you know.
So, and
that's-
so those general performance standards we review during the application. We will only approve an application if it has met those performance
Oh, I know,
standards for
I
replication.
know
So,
that's on
and what
there.
Joe was leading to is every permit or every order of conditions that we issue has to be recorded at the Worcester Registry of Deeds against the address. So if they were ever to sell their property, it's essentially a lien on the property. So they will not have a clean title. And it's not until they come back with, now we require a certified as-built plan to demonstrate that they have built the project in compliance with the approved plan, and any other conditions that we might have enacted. If it's replication, then the report by the professional wetland scientist, we'd require at a minimum 2 years of that growing reports. So if they've only submitted one, we'll say, sorry, you gotta come back next year to make sure those 80% survive, and that it is functioning correctly. And then once that certificate of compliance is issued, if we find that everything has been built in compliance, then that certificate of compliance gets recorded at the registry again and clears out the lien, essentially.
So you do check?
Oh, yes.
They
Yep.
say the compliance?
Yep.
Mhm.
Because there's a natural human tendency, yeah, I'll do that.
Yes, and
I'll do
we,
that, but.
and we as members.
Or can I have an exemption?
No.
Or can I have a waiver?
Right.
Or it's gonna cost too much?
Right.
You know,
No,
I-
and us as members, for active sites, we do go out and do compliance inspections. We check erosion controls to make sure, especially because there are sites that have their erosion control barriers pretty close to the wetland, so we want to make sure that no sediment has gone through. That's probably our biggest violation that we have, and just rectifying those. So we do, for permits, we do have a consistent inspection and follow-up.
Okay.
Mhm.
At the October 4th, 2024 meeting, and I think it may have been mentioned at other meetings, I'm not sure, but on a couple occasions, it was claimed by the Conservation Commission that, and I listened to it again today, and maybe I misinterpreted, that you don't have any jurisdiction related to groundwater.
Correct.
And in 310 CMR 10.01, in the introduction, it refers to protection of groundwater supply and quality. In 10.024A, at a minimum provides the same capacity as the original design, attenuated peak discharges, recharge groundwater levels, and remove suspended solids.
So that's that citation for the recharge is mostly for stormwater. So we want
Yeah, it is.
yeah. So
Yeah.
when it talks about groundwater, we don't have jurisdiction over the groundwater itself, but we need to ensure that the same amount of water is flowing as before.
Mhm.
So it's not groundwater specifically; it's more of the hydrology of the wetland resource area.
10.05 K3, loss of annual recharge to groundwater. It's referred to in, that was something you would have to evaluate.
Yep, so that's infiltration. So we talk about that with impervious surfaces. So we want to ensure that mostly on commercial or larger projects, they have to meet the stormwater standards, and that's where that infiltration and recharge comes from. So when they have additional impervious surfaces, they have to do things like infiltrate the stormwater directly. So like roof gutters or things from roofs will be connected to downspouts that go into dry wells, or they're called like Coltec infiltration units, so that it can slowly discharge naturally as it would pre-existing conditions.
Right, but I'm getting at the issue that this
Mhm.
is something that you are involved with.
Correct, but it's
So-
not groundwater.
Yeah,
It's
stormwater.
it's
Let me
stormwater.
just-
It's
let
not
me
really
just go.
groundwater.
Naturally occurring banks and beaches, 10.54, general performance standards. Any proposed work on a bank shall not impose or impair groundwater or surface water quality.
Mhm.
Bordering vegetation lands, 10.55, 4B2, replacement, under the replacement section, the groundwater and the surface elevation of the replacement area shall be approximately equal to that area lost.
Mhm.
So you have to evaluate
In the
groundwater.
stormwater, yep.
10.57, isolated land subject to flooding. 10.574B, general performance standards of isolated land subject to flooding. Land shall not have project activity that will adversely affect public, private water supply or groundwater supply.
Mhm.
Directly under that, adversely affect the capacity of the area to prevent pollution of groundwater. Land under water bodies and underwater, 10.56482, proposed work shall not impair groundwater or surface water quality. So you do. You have some,
I think it's difficult to, at least for me right now, explain the differences when we say we don't have jurisdiction over groundwater just as it stands. It's that the construction does not interfere with the hydrological connections of the groundwater. So it's not that we can say,
is there another commission or office that this
Board of
is?
Health is
Do
mostly
they
groundwater
approve
quality.
that first before you sign off on it? Or how does that actually get done if it's in the regulations?
Are you referring to septic systems and stuff?
No, I'm just
generally.
talking
Just
about the
general.
regulations.
Oh, just general?
I'm just talking about
Okay.
the regulations.
Mhm.
All right, because the Board of Health would get
Yeah.
involved with septic. So,
I'm,
On the
I'm just
pollution
talking
side
about
of things.
that you,
right,
Yeah.
this does come into
Yeah.
play when you're reviewing something.
Yes.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. It's
And it was said before, you don't have anything to do with
well,
it. Well,
it's
not exactly right.
it's that the ground, like, as it, I don't know how to explain it, like, as it's under the ground, as it is as a groundwater supply, we don't have jurisdiction over that. But the, the impacts of the construction in terms of hydrological health, making sure that the level, that the amount of water that is re-entering the ground from this construction, because it's within the buffer zone or within a wetland resource area, has not been changed.
Well,
Or
let me go back to 1055, which would be bordering vegetative wetlands.
Mhm.
It's my understanding that you are this is what your charge is these regulations. And in this regulation, it says the groundwater and surface elevation replacement area shall be approximately equal to that of the lost area. So You're just
Where
saying
are
you
you reading?
ignore that, or what are you saying?
I don't understand your question. I'm
read that
sorry.
Well, you said that we don't have anything to do with groundwater.
No, I did not just say that. I said we don't have to do anything with the groundwater as it stands, just as it is under the ground. What we do is we only come into play when there's, so these are performance standards when we have an application in front of us. I think
Right.
that's important to remember.
Yeah,
So
I
it's
understand.
how the construction is affecting how water is going back into the ground to be groundwater. So in ensuring that the water that's entering the ground isn't contaminated before it reaches that groundwater, or making sure that the levels that is going into the ground isn't too little or isn't too much, because with stormwater, the post condition flow velocity rate cannot be greater than pre-existing. It can be lower as long as it's not, nothing, but it cannot be greater because it would negatively impact that system.
How do you determine if you're correct on your assumptions that you haven't harmed the groundwater? You're just assuming.
Okay, well, how would you suggest
You
that we
test the groundwater.
That's not within our purview.
It's in the regulations.
We can't go dig somebody's dirt,
Yeah.
place up
Unless
to
we
find
have,
out where the
unless we have a
groundwater is.
thought. So when we think of groundwater and pollution to groundwater, we think of what construction materials are they housing on the site? Are they improper containment devices? Just construction sequencing, do they have their stockpiles contained? Do they have a construction entrance?
No fueling.
No fueling within the buffer zone. So we do have special conditions that talks about, I think that's a good one. We don't have any fueling. We can't put any trash or debris within the wetland resource, and I think even the buffer zone we have moving forward. So it's something that we condition for during construction and for after. So we have ongoing conditions like limit of fertilizer and pesticide use can't happen in the buffer zone now if you have a permit that's been issued recently because we updated our special conditions to be a little bit more robust.
Okay.
But it's, and those performance standards do come when you alter the wetland area. So most things that are coming in front of them are only altering the buffer zone. But yes, when they are altering a wetland area, we want to know what's going into that area, what are you using to replicate it, what equipment's going to be in there, what's going to be your timeline, your construction processing. If they're working within a waterway, we typically condition only in low flow or no flow conditions. If it's high flow, then we need to ensure they have a proper dewatering setup.
Time
So
of the
there's no
year.
contamination as they either, sometimes they'll just dewater and just pump it up into the pavement. Well, that's not what we want. We want to put it in a filter bag so any sediment comes out, or if we can get a direct pipe over, so there's no contamination whatsoever. So when these performance standards come into effect, I think that's the main difference in that most of the applications we have are only buffer zone, in which it's still an interest to protect the groundwater, but it's generally
You're
that
making your decisions based on things that are known to affect groundwater, rather than actually.
what we know.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah.
Unless we see like a leachate, or a sheen on the water, then okay, that's a little different. But groundwater testing is through Board of Health. If you have a well, then that permitting goes through Board of Health. And if it's drinking water, that goes through Board of Health.
The main thing I just want to bring that is something that is it's in
Yeah.
the mix.
It is difficult to sometimes kind of portray to the general public because as our community doesn't, in a plus, we don't have very many permits that alter wetlands themselves. There are some on the larger subdivisions for like the culvert crossings, so that's when we take that in consideration and making sure that it meets the stream crossing standards. So usually that's where those big pipes come in, and ensuring what the uses are of the residential areas adjacent to wetland resources. So when we think, now what we've been doing is when these single family homes come in, you might have noticed like we have been putting boundary markers around our 20-foot no-touch policy, but that's why we want a bylaw, to further enforce it, so that they cannot further encroach closer to the wetland. So we're trying to make it more visible to people as like a, hey, you can't go past here. We even have some signage on some, like conservation area, do not cross. And that's where, because we know there are going to be residential lawns, most likely they're going to use fertilizer, probably weed killer, that we preemptively condition those in our order of conditions, and they survive after we issue that certificate of compliance. So even though the permit is closed out, those conditions will exist in perpetuity.
Does that include people that have an agricultural waiver?
If agricultural exemptions would fall under their agricultural
So you can-
exemptions.
Regulate fertilizer use?
Not so agriculture
Or
can get a little tricky
pesticides?
because they have to have a licensed pesticide applicator. So they have their MDR requirements and their pesticide application licenses. I know that there's very specific timings, like if it's too windy, they can't go out. If it's too wet, they can't go out. But agriculture, it's
A lot of that goes back to NRCS, doesn't it?
Some of it, and a lot, the agriculture exemptions, you basically, as long as they're commercial agricultural entities, so they're there to make a profit, they can basically use their existing area that they have. It's only when they go to really expand, then they need to come before the commission, and we need to review in compliance with the Wetlands Protection Act. And usually that's because they've run out of area. They need more area for grazing, and that's a little bit closer to the wetland. But agricultural exemptions do have allowances for fertilizer and chemical applications.
The last thing I had is that I don't, who exactly decides that there's no alternative project plan? When it's presented, that's just the person they hired saying, and they're being told by the person that's hired them, this is what we want.
Yeah.
Who actually says, because half of these, I'm a layperson, I can say, yeah, there's an alternative, don't build there.
Yeah. We can only really consider alternatives. There's a section called alternatives analysis, and we can only require a robust alternatives analysis when it's riverfront area. So riverfront area is a perennial stream, or it runs year round. It has a specific watershed size and stream flow rate. So there's from USGS, there's a program called Stream Stats that is the primary, I think, source that you use to determine that watershed size and stream velocity throughout.
Plus you have to determine that it's a stream or a river in the first place. It has to
Right.
be the three.
So there's two options for streams. There's intermittent and there's perennial. So an intermittent stream, runs not year-round, periodically, maybe just seasonally. Perennial can still dry up during the summer, though, if there's a drought. But in perennial, I hate to call it buffer zone because it's not, but our jurisdictional area then extends 200 feet out, and that 200 feet is actually a resource area itself. So because that itself is a resource, we can say, hey, you need to look at this a little bit more. You need to provide all the practical alternatives, which one is no build, and demonstrate, and typically, it's usually the no build is not a viable alternative, unfortunately, because they can use the cost prohibitiveness of, we have this property, and as long as they've stayed under that 10% of the riverfront disturbance,
10% max. Or
you know,
5,000 square feet.
or 5 that,
No, it was
whichever's
revised in
larger.
97, now it says 10% if it's after 97.
Yeah.
yes. So
who determines whether it's cost prohibitive? I mean, if you got Rupert Murdoch in here versus myself, it's a little bit different.
I think, it's up to the commission, really. If we're the ones with the application in front of us, there's been times where we've asked for a better, more robust alternatives analysis. It can be as simple as, you need to move the house a little bit further out of so the first 100 feet is called the inner riparian, and the 100 to 100 is outer riparian, so that we want to protect the inner riparian as much as we can. So what we typically would do as a commission is look if there's an alternative to at least move it to the outer riparian if there's any available space for that. There's also different allowances if if it's a pre-developed or previously disturbed site. So if it's previously disturbed, then there's an absence of topsoil. If it's previously developed, then it can be lawn. And so there are some allowances if there's kind of a previously disturbed or development to get a little bit more out of a site from the applicant's side. But it would be up to us to look at those alternatives and determine if it meets the performance standard. Oh, so this is what I was talking about earlier. Performance standards of the Wetlands Protection Act, or the interests of the act.
You have a beautiful town here. It's a beautiful place. Don't let it get messed up.
No, it's
Don't
beautiful
let it
town.
get messed up.
I think, I think
keep
as
protecting the wildlife habitat.
No, I think as a commission, things have changed in the last couple years, and I think what you've brought up is something that we're all considering.
It's an amazing place.
And that's why we want the wetlands bylaw.
It's just a beautiful.
Yeah.
Well,
The other thing I want you to understand is Rutland is the headwaters to 3 different watersheds.
Mhm.
So we get a lot of oversight by DCR and DEP because it's considered exceptionally sensitive, the whole town.
yeah.
Right.
And that's why 50% of the land in town is protected.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's not generally known,
Yeah.
right? But we've got a lot of protected land in town, right?
I-
And it's for good reason.
I grew up in Colorado
Mm.
most of my life, and I've never had a bear in my front yard there. I've never had turkey in my front yard. I've got bobcat. I got pictures of bobcat.
Yeah.
Fox.
Yep.
But
Oh, yeah.
but you live in
And
a
my
great area
dog,
for that.
for
You're in
Pete's
a,
sake.
you're in an ideal spot.
I have tracks. There was one. The first winter I ever had a moose come across it.
Yep.
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 I had a
It's-
moose tear up my whole yard.
It's amazing.
Really?
Just
Call me
believe
next
it.
time.
When they gallop,
Yeah.
Right.
believe
It's a
me.
nice
Scary.
place. Be self-protected.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a great night. All right. Is there anything
Nice
else
job.
before we go into executive session? What was that? Yeah. Okay. Nothing else. All right. So I will. It's reason number 7, right? So I will accept a motion to
So-
hold on. To enter into executive session for reason number 7, and the commission will not be entering public session again. So can I have a
So moved.
second?
Does it, we have to shut the door?
We will, yeah. Second.
Second.
All those by roll call.
Delco I.
Langer and I.
Clock eye.
Gentilucci, aye.
Danza, aye. All right. We are.
I almost answered.